Hello, hello. Buenas noches, buenas tardes, buenos dias, depending where you are watching from. I know it's Tuesday. It is not Wednesday. If you're wondering why I am live today, just because I make up the rules around here. Actually, I will be going live 3 times this week. So today, tomorrow, and Friday. So y'all will get so much content. Um, but thank you for joining me live. Those of you who are watching the replay in the future, I appreciate you joining us and watching as well. Some of y'all have been putting off a move abroad or long-term travel because of your children. And I think that's silly. Talking about, oh, I'm going to wait until they finish school. I'm going to wait until they're older. Silliness. I have shared in many places on the internet that when I moved to Honduras 7.5 years ago, I took my daughter with me. She was 15 at the time. And I think I can confidently say that was probably the best thing I could have ever done for her. But why? I understand. Y'all don't want to take my word from it because I'm somebody who wanted to leave. How about hearing directly from someone whose parents moved them abroad when they were just 10 months old? That's what we're doing tonight. I have a very special guest. But before we start that conversation, I think I'm just going to do a quick introduction for the folks who might be new here and might not know me. My name is Adelia Aborashade, and this is my channel, Picky Girl Travels the World. It is where I do my best to demystify travel, money, and everything in between in support of women like you who are trying to live life on their terms, not society's. If I sound like your kind of person, or these are things you want to know more about, be sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button. Either one of those things will let YouTube know that you want to see more content like this in your feed. Okay. So I'll bring my extra special guest on the screen. Hello, hello, welcome, welcome. You got a
Hello.
few fans in the chat tonight.
Yes,
I'm
I
pretty
see
sure
my
you can
fans.
see
Yes,
that.
this is so exciting.
Okay. So I mentioned in my introduction that your parents moved abroad initially when you were just 10 months old. Uh,
Correct.
well, okay, hold on. Let me backtrack a little bit because the thumbnail for this video says in big giant purple letters, third culture kid. And there might be somebody who is watching this that is unfamiliar with that. Unfamiliar with that term. It's a term used for people who are raised in a culture outside of their parents' culture or outside of their country of nationality for a significant part of their childhood and developing years. You initially moved abroad when you were 10 months old, came
Correct.
back to the US around age 6, moved again at age 10 to a new country, and then to another country when you were 16. So
Correct.
your dad is from Philly, your mom is from the Caribbean. So you, to me, are like textbook third culture kid.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
So um, how does that feel? Do you think of yourself in that way?
Honestly, yes, I do. I think it took me like physically living back in the US to realize just how third culture I am, if that makes sense. So I definitely do feel like I've inhabited like that identity as like a third culture kid for sure. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Well, I was going to ask this question a little later, but now I'm curious. Do you feel like an American, like a U.S. American? Oh,
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. It's really funny. like, how do I even explain this? So when I'm in Panama, or I formerly lived in Mexico and Japan. So in those environments, they all say that like I'm American because I am one. You know what I mean? Like I was born in the U.S. and I've just lived abroad. But it's funny coming back to the U.S. because they're like, I don't feel like an American when I'm here. You know what I mean? I feel like an anomaly because I haven't lived here enough to really know the American experience. Like my friends talk about like prom or like homecoming games, and I'm like, it's not the same back in Panama. Like we don't do that. You know what I mean? Like big football games, a pep rally. That's we don't have that back home. So I feel like it's almost like a really odd disconnect of like I have the American passport, but I don't feel like I embody what like an American is in the spaces that I have been inhabiting. So yeah.
Well, I lived in the United States for 41 years, and I can't say that I ever really felt American.
Yeah.
So don't feel odd about that. Now, you initially lived abroad in Japan.
Correct.
Do you remember much of that?
I don't, but it's funny because, like, I feel as though culturally, I am I really align with, like, my Japanese upbringing, if that makes sense, like, the food that I consume, it's very Japanese centered, or, like, the shows that I watch, it's, like, very Asian centered or, like, East Asian centered. Even the books I've been reading nowadays are very much by, like, Asian authors. So I feel as though in that regard, I you can sense that I've lived in an Asian country, but, like, I don't remember anything. I don't speak the language at all, sadly. So, in that regard, I don't know what's happening, but definitely, like, culturally, there's, like, an affluence of Japanese within me for sure. Yeah.
Did you ever speak Japanese? I would
I want
imagine
to
you
I
did.
want to say that I did, because being, like, a little kid, like, you kind of pick up on a language. So, I definitely think at one point in my life, I was a little Japanese speaking Black girl, but not anymore, sadly.
Now, y'all moved back to the States. You were 6, that meant your sister was 8, and
Correct,
you were there from 6 to 10.
correct.
Now, what do you remember about living in the US and the transition from Japan to the US then?
I really don't remember the transition from Japan to the US, if I'm being completely honest. I just kind of remember, like, vaguely being in Japan and then randomly, like, being in the US for a period of my life. So, transition-wise, I think because I was so young, it was almost easier for me to even move because you're just able to adapt easily. You know what I mean? Like, you're like, "Okay, new place, new people, new friends, like, I'm gonna be okay," type energy. But I really don't remember the transition part. I just know that it wasn't anything jarring, which I think is a nice thing to be able to be blessed to have for sure.
Okay, and so then at 10, y'all moved to Mexico.
Mhm.
What do you remember about that transitioning from the US to Mexico?
So that was hard because also it was hilarious. My dad, he told us through like a card. We were in the car coming home from gymnastics and he gave us my sister and I like a card and he was like, "You're moving to Mexico." And I was like, "Oh, okay." Like what? What? I was just confused. And then, the emotions hit because, I'm in middle school, like these are supposed to be my friends for life. Like I'm supposed to be here for life. I was still kind of getting acclimated to like middle school, going into high school, like no, not high school, but middle school experiencing that type of stuff. So it was a lot, especially just kind of going into the fifth grade to Mexico. So having been in the fourth grade in the US and then fifth grade in Mexico, just kind of having to readapt to just a completely different environment of like the US to a Mexican experience. And then having not known the language beforehand, you feel like, a stranger to this. Like you feel like, like an anomaly to a culture and just having to kind of reacclimate yourself and assimilate and kind of see what this new culture is. It's a lot for a kid to have to do, and I even though my family helped a lot, they're not at school with me, so I have to kind of do that part myself. And within my school in Mexico, it was kind of a distinct divide between like expats, so like Americans, military kids, expat kids, embassy kids, and then like the Mexicans. There was very not segregated, but like there was a divide. So it was kind of this dynamic of having to, I don't know, like figure myself out and like learning a language, learning new people, finding myself because middle school, like you're exploring everything. So having to find my own sense of self while also simultaneously being in a new country, it was a lot. But I think over time I was able to, figure it out, making friends, learning the language, actively learning the language was a really, in retrospect, blessing for me to have done because it helped a lot for me to know the language of the country that I was in and then being able to talk to like different people from different areas as well was really refreshing. So that was a long-winded
Did you
answer, but
Well, no, it's your answer. Did you know that moving to another country was even on the table? Like, I imagine
oh,
your parents would talk about, well, when we lived in Japan, and you had some vague reference of that, but because I would think you thought, oh, okay, that's over, we did that.
yeah.
And
That's a really good question. It's funny because I think as I grew up, they were more transparent about, like, the moving process, but they really kept it under wraps until, like, the card scenario. Like, until I saw the card, it was a blur. I didn't know what was happening. But moving to Panama, though, they were very upfront about what's happening. They were like, "Okay, we might go to Singapore, we might go to Panama, we might go to Turkey." They were telling us beforehand, like, we're potentially going to move, so, like, kind of get ready to leave. And I was like, "Okay." Like, mentally, I'm preparing myself. But no, like, they said, "We're off. Like, we're leaving. Get ready, pack your stuff." I was like, "Oh, okay. Sure.
do you
Yes."
remember how long you had before y'all, from when they told you to when y'all left?
Honestly, no, but it's funny, like, it all feels like flashes. You know what I mean? It's like suddenly, like, I'm in Mexico, I'm in Panama, I'm in Japan. So, I don't know. I just remember, like, vividly seeing my living room packed with boxes and then just kind of it hit me. I was like, "Oh, I'm leaving the US." You know what I mean? Just seeing my house no longer be a home was definitely like a wake-up call that I'm no longer going to be living here. Like, I'm literally leaving the country. So, it was a lot.
I interview quite a few parents, particularly moms,
Mhm.
on this channel with kids, and I get asked about this a lot. And one of the concerns is like, I'm gonna uproot my child's life in America and take them to this other country, and they're gonna struggle, and they're not gonna make friends, and they're gonna hate me for it. You
Mm.
hate your parents?
Never. I love my parents, and I love them for uprooting me. I think definitely you are being uprooted, like, I think that's the point, you know? Like, my mom, she's in this call, so she's gonna laugh at me saying this, but she was like, "Get comfortable being uncomfortable," and that's the idea of moving. Like, it's not supposed to be comfortable, like, you're literally going to a new country or a new state or a new place. It's all very unfamiliar, but that's the point, like, that's how you grow, in my opinion, like, in being in new spaces, that's how you're able to kind of flourish in a way that you would never expect. Like, if I were only in Ohio, I would not know Spanish. I would not know Portuguese. I would not have met the people that I've met abroad. But I have because I've been blessed enough to be able to do so. You know what I mean? So I think the fear of uprooting, it makes sense. Don't get me wrong. Like, being comfortable is a nice feeling. So I love being comfortable. But I think there's also a beauty in growth and kind of seeing and exploring like, okay, like what's next? Like where else can I go? You know what I mean? So I think definitely being able to be a third culture kid has given me the ability to say like, oh, I'm not what Ohio me was. Like, I'm a new version of Kennedy, and that's amazing. So yeah.
I think I think the parents who are concerned about that see moving to another country as something very, very different and much bigger than uprooting a child and moving them to another state. I
Very true.
think. And I don't know that it is. Now, I can't really speak to that because I lived in the same house from the time I was born until I was 19. So I can't really speak to it, but to
Yeah,
me, it's all the same.
for sure. I mean, same too. I can only speak from like moving countries. I've never moved within the state. You know what I mean? I've done drastic jumps across borders, not within the same, state or like continent. But I don't know. I think moving, it's all an uprooting process. I mean, yes, it's more drastic if you're moving to a different country, but I think moving, period, can be deemed as drastic. Both are different
I think
forms of it, but yeah.
I think so. Now I asked you before if you felt American, and you were like, not really. Where do you consider to be home?
That's such a good question. I don't know. I like to say that like the world's my home nowadays. That's what I say. Sounds corny, but the world's my home. I kind of make a home wherever I'm at. Like right now, Atlanta's my home. You know, soon somewhere else might be my home. And when I go back to Mexico, that's still my home because I feel, a sentimental value towards the place. Even Japan, I may not remember it, but I feel it in my heart. And that's also home in a sense. So I don't know. I think home is whatever you make it. People are always like, oh, I make my own home. And that's so true. Like, there's not like a singular place that I'm like, oh, this is where I'm going to return to. But you know, everywhere is my home in a sense. Yeah.
Well, I was just curious about that.
Mhm.
Um, One of the other big concerns that parents often have when they're thinking about whether it's like, I want to take my kids out of school and world school them for a while and we travel nomadically, or they're considering a move to another country and to be somewhat sedentary in that place, is about like family.
Mm,
You have grandparents, you have
sure.
uncles, aunts, cousins. Um, I don't know what my question is. Do you feel like, or have, I don't know, I'm trying to decide. Do I want to ask you the question, like, do you feel like you're missing something there? Or have you been able to like build those relationships because you weren't physically in the same place with those people?
Mm,
And take whichever question you want.
okay, I'm gonna answer the second one. I think it's funny. Even with my sister, the supplies, I think distance has made my heart grow fonder for like my family for sure. Like it took my sister leaving for college for me to realize how much I love my sister. It took me moving away for me to realize how much I love my grandparents. And now I call my like grandfather like almost every day. Like I'm always calling him, texting him. With my sister, like I see her almost weekly because I want to see her face at least once a week. So you know what I mean? I I don't know. I think distance has definitely helped me realize like who I really care about, if that makes sense. Like seeing like the relationships I want to continue to foster and grow and flourish. They've really improved through distance and kind of being able to find myself and also realize, oh, this person is someone who I really value in my life and I want to, stay in contact with them. So I don't know. I definitely think moving has helped. Just kind of realizing, I don't know, like my who my family is, and also just kind of moving has made me realize that family can also be chosen. You know what I mean? Like I can create my own family as well. And creating friendships, like the people I've met in college are now like my second family. You know what I mean? Like I've been to their house, I've met their parents. So they're also my second chosen family as well. So I think distance has definitely helped in both regards of just being able to see who I cherish and who I love and who I want to like continue to grow with over time for sure. Yeah. I
Okay.
don't know if that was a question,
Um,
but
yes, no, perfectly fine. Kennedy is 19, but I know you're asking this question just because she is very, very wise. A lot
Thank you.
more wise than some really older people I know. So Kennedy is
LOL.
19.
Uh,
She is a sophomore in college, which seems
Freshman.
funny to me
Freshman
because
still. I have
freshman,
one more
okay.
week. One more week.
Okay.
Still a
All right.
freshman though.
Second year of college, about to be a sophomore.
Yeah.
And so this is to me like it's not like I'm talking to you and you're 25 or 30. This is all still, very,
Yeah.
very, very fresh. Um, we have a question for you. Francis wants to know, do you think that you'll make a life abroad after college or stay in the US?
So I'm asked this a lot by my parents, and I don't think I'm gonna be in the US. I think I'm only gonna stay here for school because unfortunately, like the US just has really good schools. But I don't see myself in the US because to be transparent, I don't like the US. Like I don't like I just don't having lived abroad for so
Like it
long,
either.
I don't like it.
I
Like
don't
I
like
don't like it here. You know what I mean? Like I love the people I've met, but just like culturally and just as a whole, the US is just very scary and exhausting and draining. And I don't like that. So I see myself living abroad. It's giving maybe South America again, somewhere else. I don't know, but definitely just going abroad is something that I'm since I've been doing it for so long, that's like now my calling in life. So I don't see myself staying here unless like I have to for like work. Yeah.
Okay. Well, no, it is not a place that I enjoy being, so I understand that. I just got back yesterday, and that's the third time I've been to the US since the beginning of March. And I have
Wow.
another trip in June, and I'm just like, man, I've not been in this country that
I
often. I,
know.
I don't
Wow.
know
You've got to like
since
prep
when.
yourself. Like it takes prep, you know?
And
Like
it's interesting to hear you say that because you spent such a small portion of your life in the US. So,
exact
like,
right? Yeah.
I say that because I grew up there. I was conditioned by all the things that are American culture, and so when I left and I got to live abroad, I got to like shed those things. But when I go back, they come back. It's very interesting to hear you say that somebody who didn't really live there all that long. That's
Isn't that
very
funny?
interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did you have any like when you went to college, that's really your first time living in the US,
Yeah.
for what, like, I can't do math. Is that 10 years? I don't know. We're gonna say
It's
around a
it's
decade
it's
or
been a
so.
minute. It's been a
Um,
minute. Yeah.
okay, did you have any culture shock? Like,
Yes.
things where you were
Dra
like, "I can't believe this is how
drastic.
y'all are living. This is what y'all are doing."
Yeah. Drastic cultural shock. But it's like a cultural shock that I could only express to like my friends back home. Like my best friend, she lives in Canada. So every time I'm like, yo, this is we don't do this back home. Like what's going on? I don't know. It's like
Can you give us an example of
for
one of the
sure.
things?
So it's like it's not even it's like basic stuff. So like physical touch. Mexico and Panama, deeply touchy cultures. Like you meet your dentist and like you do like a little like kiss on the cheek. You know what I mean? US, we don't touch here. Like we don't hug honestly. It's like a handshake and even that's like I have to know you a few times to even touch your hand. You know what I mean? And I was like, cuz I would meet someone newly and be like, "Oh, hug." You know what I mean? Like that was my intro. And then my friend came up to me and she was like, "Babe, like we don't do that here." And I was like, "Oh gosh." Like this is new. You know what I mean? And also even just the act of like languages. To me, languages was the norm. Like being bilingual was like the standard. You know what I mean? Like if you don't know Spanish and English, what are you doing? Like if you're not trilingual, like what's happening? Whereas here, people aren't bilingual. Like you know what I mean? Like people are learning a different language and they meet me and they're like, "Oh, that's so cool." But I'm like, "No, like I feel like I'm behind in my culture because I should be knowing at least four languages by now." Like, you know what I mean? So it's funny kind of seeing how different like the things that different cultures I think like prioritize, if that makes sense, just having to, assimilate to America, but also being American is also kind of like a tug and pull process because it's like I'm literally from here, but I don't feel like an American, but that feels odd even to say. Because even as an intro, going to school in Atlanta, in my school environment, they're always like, "Where are you from?" And I say Panama because saying the US, it's like, no, like I'm lying. You know what I mean? Like I know I'm from the US, like I'm from Ohio, but saying, "Oh yeah, I'm from Ohio," like I feel like a fraud because I'm not. Like I'm not Ohioan, you know? Like I'm from Panama, I'm from Mexico, I'm from blah blah. Even my sister's like she says that she's from Mexico because she graduated from there, and I'm from Panama because I graduated from there. So I don't know. It's
No,
very odd.
I struggle with that question because it's like, what are you really asking? Do you want to know where I live? Do you want to
Exactly.
know where I was
Where I
born? Like,
was
what are you
born.
asking? Because
Because
where are you
technically
from?
I am from Panama. Like I got on a plane from Panama to live here. So technically I'm correct. But, you know, I don't know. It's interesting.
Okay, and here's the other thing. On the surface, anybody looking at you says, "Black girl, American." So there's the expectation that you know how to be an American. You know how things work
Yeah.
in the US when really and truly that might not be the case.
Yeah. It's a lot. It was a lot also having to figure it out too. Because my sister, like, she didn't give me like any warning. Because I feel as though she's more, how do I say this? Like assimilated into American culture than I am. So me coming in, I was like, what's going on? Like this is so new. Because there's not like a, spreadsheet book, telling you how to do this lifestyle. You have to kind of figure it out by yourself. And so it's been a lot of, trial and error, but like I don't know, like even like things like catcalling, that too. Like I'm sadly used to that in my culture because like, in Panama, like you walk and people catcall you. But here, my friends were like stunned when like a guy catcalled them. And I was like, oh, maybe this is not normal. Like maybe this should not maybe this should not be the norm, you know? So it's kind of seeing how the difference in upbringing and how it shapes a person, and also just kind of seeing how like I'm different from someone else because I've had so and so experience than them or stuff like that. I don't know, it's just really interesting to analyze and also just to live in. I don't know.
Is going to school also different or not so much?
Hmm. Like yes and no, but I think it's different because I'm in college. You know what I mean? Like high school, the let me think. So I was in the IB back in high school. And so the rigor was very high because the IB program, it's a very advanced program. It's like the AP program, but like international based. So it's very intense. But I feel as though coming to college, it's just so different. It's so different. I can't even like try to pretend like I can make a congruency between the two because they're just very different because I'm in different spaces. So being back in Panama, I was the only Black kid in my grade. Like it was me and then this Venezuelan, and then everyone else was like Hispanic, Latino, like everyone. Whereas here, it's only Black people. So it's that also really changes your academic space because you're able to have different forms of discourse. You know what I mean? So it's like back home, we would never discuss critical race theory. Like race was never at the forefront because everyone like was of the same race. Whereas here, we're diving into like colorism, it's like hair, it's like, respectability politics, like there's different forms of discourse because you're in a different environment. So I don't know, I think that really has played into my academic experience and like just I don't know. I think rigor-wise, they're both complex, like,
Well, I
I
would
don't know.
think that where you go to school is like a place that you need to, you couldn't have slacked in high school and gotten into the university where you go to school. But
Exactly.
this is a conversation that Ivana and I have a lot because she's like, where did you go to school? Like, what did you learn at school? Implying that where I went to school was not as rigorous as where the education she got. But I would imagine um, what the kinds of things you did, the kinds of things that you learned at your international school, because you went to an international school in
Correct.
Mexico and in Panama, is going to be different than somebody who went to public school
Very
in the
true.
US.
Very true. Yes.
Okay. Now, you spoke a little bit before about kind of like the benefits, some of the benefits you got because your dad's job took y'all all these places and you ended up growing up outside the US. Are there things that you feel you missed out
I mean, yes, but it's like I wouldn't trade it. You know what I mean?
on?
I feel
Okay.
like I missed
Explain.
out on like the generic American experience, like in the movies. Like I mentioned this beforehand, just like the pep rallies or like big sports functions, like senior week and doing all this, like, being dumb in high school, like all that stuff. I don't know. I think in the movies they portray it as like this thing that you're supposed to experience, and I didn't have that. But I also had something different. Like being international is like we have different parties, different functions, different events. And so, it's not the same. And so even though I can be envious of what the American version I see in films is, I also am happy that like I was able to create my own high school experience. I don't know. Yeah.
What I am hearing, because a lot of parents who are hesitant to move while their kids are young or while their kids are still in school is that same thing. They want their child to have the traditional US American high school experience. And so what I'm hearing you say is, yes, I missed out on that, but you
Yeah.
wouldn't trade it for what you got instead.
Exactly. And also I think you can low key get what you miss in high school in college. Like, I didn't have football games in high school, but I'm getting them now in college. You know what I mean? I didn't have XYZ in high school, but I'm now seeing it happening in college. So even though I'm behind, I'm still experiencing it. Like, I remember so vividly my first homecoming, like American homecoming, and being a HBCU homecoming, like, I was so emotional because I was like, this is my first homecoming. Like, guys, this is my first time doing this. All my friends were very confused because they're like, yo, Kennedy, like, what's happening? We do this all the time in high school. But I was like, no, I didn't get to have this in Panama. Like, this is my first time doing this. I remember so really, like, I text my mom this paragraph. I was like, Mom, I'm happy that I'm at my school. Like, this is so cool. I'm so blessed to be here. And she was like, oh, I'm so proud of you. So I don't know. It's like, so I think honestly, you can get what you lacked in college, or you can at least seek it out in college because I know I have friends who go to like UCLA or USC, and so I can get my, generic high school experience back there as well, like, frat parties or whatever. Just being able to be in that space, that also kind of gives high school in a sense. So I think you can make up for it through different life experiences as well along the way. So yeah.
Well, okay. Well, again, I was going to ask this later, but since you were talking about it, did it sounds like you saw going to college as an opportunity to kind of have some of those traditional American experiences. Did you
Yes,
consider going to school abroad at
I
all?
did. I did, but I was not allowed to. So my parents love them so much, but they said, "You're not allowed to go to school, not in the US," because they wanted me to be close to home, or at least close to someone who was like close to a relative. So my grandparents live in Delaware and my other grandparents live in Houston. So they wanted me to at least like be in a place where like if I were in trouble, they could like someone could come and like, help me out. I fought I fought really badly. I was like, "Guys, please, I want to go explore the world. I want to see things." And they're like, "No, only US." Like my dad was like, "I'm not gonna help you pay for school if it's not in the US." And I was like, "Well,
Mhm.
that got me."
Well,
Like I was like, "Okay, yeah," So I'm in the US, but I think even then, like, there's international internships, there's studying abroad, there's, domestic exchange. Like there's a lot of things I can still do internationally. So I'm not too pressed because I can still be abroad and I still live abroad. Like my family is still in Panama, so I can still go back home and be abroad. But I wouldn't change it for the world either because I love my college. So my parents did a good job with this one. But I did try to go abroad to study for college and I was not allowed to, but God's okay.
I love that. They did a good job with this.
They did a good job.
Um,
They did.
so so let's talk about that, because I will say that I was surprised. Knowing you, I was like, oh yeah, she's gonna be studying. She's not going to the US. Um,
That's what I said. That's what I said. But
Now, why go to an HBCU?
okay. I love my EPCU because I have never been around black people in my whole entire life. I've always been amongst predominantly Asians, so Japan, or, Hispanics, Latinos in like Mexico and Panama. So I've never been in like an affluent black space ever. Even though my
But
mom did
wait,
it.
I'm gonna interrupt you right now to clarify because there
Wait, that
are.
that is true. Let me correct myself with this. So Panama and well, no, Mexico and Panama, they both have a lot of black people in them. Specifically Panama. There's a lot of black people in Panama. The issue though is that in being in privileged spaces where I am, black people don't inhabit those, if that makes sense. So specifically in
Yes,
Panama, a lot of black people tend to be in like a lower class than my family and I. So we typically don't see them. Like they're typically portrayed as like the help or like service people. So even then they see us and they're like, how are you guys in this nice apartment? You guys should be working as like maids or a chauffeur. So that's why I wanted to go to HBC because I wanted to be in spaces where I could see myself. You know what I mean? And also like see myself. I don't know how to phrase this because I don't want this to sound like degrading black people. But it's almost like kind of seeing myself in the spaces that I was inhabiting, if that makes sense. Like seeing people like me or just seeing not like me, but like just seeing fellow black people. And growing up my mom did. Mm,
I don't think that's any different than Black American kids in the US who make the choice to attend an HBCU. I think
yeah.
their reasoning is very similar to that.
Yeah, and my mom did a great job growing up, like, she would always, like, somehow, I don't know how she did, she always somehow find the black people in the area, like, she would always be like, "Oh my god, I found this girl who can be your friend." And I was like, "Mom, how did you find this girl?" But she would always find, fellow black expats, from the US or just, in her space, in her environment, and then make sure to connect us all with them so that we were able to like know that like people like us are also in this space, which is very nice. But I don't know, just being able to see someone who looks like me and not in like like a service level, if that makes sense. It's been nice to do because I don't know, black people deserve to see themselves in positions of, you know, a lawyer or a, excelled scholar or something like that. And being on HBCU, I've been able to see that just head on. It's been so refreshing. because I love growing up amongst different racial environments, but seeing myself has also been nice because from like an identity scope, I've been able to grow so much in my blackness and just being able to see myself flourish in this new space as well, which has been really nice.
Okay. Now, when you went to school in Mexico, when you went to school in Panama, like we said, international school, it's mostly the children of corporate expat, the children of embassy personnel, that sort of thing. So not often you were the only one, right?
Yeah.
And I think that that is a concern that Black parents have, particularly if they're going to a country where maybe there isn't a Black population, or the population doesn't have access to the same sorts of things. Now, how was it navigating those spaces, primarily white spaces, as a Black person, but also as a foreigner?
It's a great question. Um, it was hard. I'm not gonna lie. It was really hard. I wrote this in a recent application that I did, and how I really had to be my own advocate a lot of the times in these spaces that I was, inhabiting because no one else was Black. No one else was who I was in this space. Like, I was a Black foreigner, and so and I was also like an American. So like they didn't really see me either. I'm trying to phrase this like I'm trying to like channel my thoughts. But I don't know, it was hard. Yeah. Because you have to humble yourself and be like, I know that I'm an anomaly in this space, but I'm still a being in this space who deserves to be acknowledged. Like my experiences are still valid even though I'm not from here, and I deserve to be heard even though I'm not from here. And I think learning the language helped a lot with that because they saw me as their equal once I knew what they were saying. You know what I mean? Like once I could be like, "Oh, like, I know what you're saying, and I can also talk back to you, and this we could have a dialogue in the same language." They're like, "Okay, let me hear this American out because she speaks Spanish." You know what I mean? So, I don't know. Once I learned Spanish, people began to respect me more, and they were like, "Okay, she knows what she's talking about, like, let me hear what her thoughts are." But that's also challenging because that really takes a specific person to do. Like, that just takes a specific being to have that sort of, like, drive and be like, "Okay, I'm gonna keep going and not feel, like, small in this space anymore." But that just takes a di that, like, takes a specific person to be able to do, you know what I mean? And not everyone's like that. So that's also hard to kind of figure out how to be your own advocate and stand up for yourself when, like, people aren't preaching that to you personally. Like, not having a figure that I could really look to in the spaces that I was in was hard because I had to, like, look at myself and be like, "What can I do for myself and people like me in the future in this environment?" So, it was hard, but you learn from it, you grow from it, and then you move on. So,
Is there
yeah.
anything your parents could have done to make that easier for you navigating those spaces?
Mm, not really, because once again, they're not at school with me, and they could only do so much. It gets to a point where you have to kind of stick up for yourself and be like, "What am I going to do for me to make the most out of this situation that I'm in?" So, yeah, like, I did that through clubs, I did that through learning the languages, I did that through making friends that weren't just in my lifestyle. I was like, "Let me talk to this different group. Let me not only be with the Americans, let me see what the Spanish speakers are talking about because I wanna be with them too." You know what I mean? So going out of my way to just kind of explore those areas as well helped a lot in my experience, just kind of not letting myself fit into a box. There we go. That's what I'm trying to think. Like I don't have to be in this binary mold of an American. I can explore different avenues of myself because I need to make the most out of my time here, you know? And I feel like I did so. So,
Okay. Okay.
yeah.
Um, okay, so we have a few questions from the folks in the chat for you.
Cool.
Um, so we had a question. Did you go to high school all 4 years in one place?
So, high school, Mexico City, 9, 10. So, but then it was COVID year. So, like, first semester, ninth grade, I was in high school. Then it was like Zoom periods. And I moved to Panama for 11th and 12th, and that was in person. So I did high school in two different countries.
Okay. All right. Um, we had another question about um, if it were your choice versus your parents, would you have chosen this way of life?
Honestly, yes. Yes. But I think it takes living in the life to choose the life, if that makes sense. Like I wouldn't have ever sought this out if I hadn't done it before, if that makes sense. Like if I were just an American living in America, well living in the US, um, I wouldn't be seeking out going abroad if I was like fine living in my country. Whereas since my dad was able to travel so much, now I'm like, oh, now I want to live abroad. Now I want, people are like, you know what I mean? Now I want to be in these new spaces because that's how I was brought up. So I think it took me doing it for me to say that I would then choose it again in the future. Yeah.
Um, how 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 were you received by the people at your school? Like,
Oh,
they see
that was
you.
very chill. That was
Okay.
okay because but it was only chill because I had Mexico as, like, my first introduction. So Mexico, the way it worked was that, like, I went in and there were a lot of already, like, fellow expat kids there, so you're able to kind of find your group ahead of time in middle school. So throughout the journey, it's like, okay, I have my tribe. I can seek like, I can, like, have as comfort even though I was still exploring different avenues. But because I had that, I was unable to do well in Panama because Panama was not like that. There were fewer expats in Panama. It was more international. Like Panama compared to Mexico was very international. So in having Mexico as my base and then now knowing Spanish, that's how I was able to flourish in Panama. But without that, I fear it would have been very different because I would not have had my Spanish background to like support me during the journey. So, yeah.
Okay, but then you go to this school, your new school, your university, an HBCU, and at first glance, you just look like a regular Black girl. And then people
And
are
I
like,
and I
"Oh, where'd
start
you go to
talking though.
school?"
It's funny because people were like, "I knew that you were different because you speak differently." And I was like, "What?" Apparently I talk like fast or something. Like not fast, but like I mix words in the way that I would do in Spanish. Or like I would sound things out or like I make sounds. Like Spanish and Portuguese are very like vocal. It's like ah or like ah, like you know what I mean? Like you kind of like make noises. And so I would do that and they're like, she's not from here. Like she's where is she from? So I don't know. That was also funny to see because I was like, I'm talking normally, and they were like, no, something's up. Where are you from? And I was like, oh, okay, yeah.
Okay. Just wants to know, what is your major, minor?
Okay, so I'm a comparative women's studies major, and I'm minoring in sociology and international studies.
That's a lot.
Hefty. She's hefty. Yeah. But I love academia, so
Okay. And are you involved in like extracurricular things? What do you
yes.
do outside of
One
school during the year, but also like over the summer?
one would say I'm in too many extracurriculars, but that's okay. It's okay. So the one that I'm most active in are the Blueprint, which is the newspaper on my campus. I'm also in the speech and debate club. I'm also in NCNW. I'm in a club called Afrikidi, and there's one more that I'm in. I'm also in volunteering stuff. I'm in the Midnight Riot, which is like a environmental social justice club. I also volunteer for Black Kid Art, which basically amplifies Black artists amongst the Black youth to make them just know the intersection between like art and education. And nowadays, I'm also volunteering at Hope, which is a woman's like food community shelter where I'm giving food to homeless women and also amplifying them through like resources and stuff like that, which is very nice. And my summer plans, they're they're looming. They're in the air a little bit, and that's okay. Hopefully I'll figure it out by next week. But the current one that I'm eyeing is this virtual internship in diplomacy. I want to be a diplomat one day, so I might do that one. But I'm also eyeing stuff in like journalism and entertainment. I don't know. I have a lot of niche interests, which is why like
That's
I
fine.
dabble. I just like dabble. Yeah. Yeah.
Back in the day, we used to call that being well-rounded. So,
I like that. Well-rounded. I like that. Yeah.
okay. Well, I have one more question for you.
Beautiful.
What advice do you have for parents um, who are planning to move abroad with their children?
I'm gonna quote
From because
Nike.
like I can give advice as a parent who took a child,
Mhm.
but I think your advice is going to be
Is
more
from the
interesting.
child.
Yes.
Yes. So I said I'm gonna quote Nike and say just do it because you should just do it. You know what I mean? Um, I'm also gonna quote Dune and say that fear is the mind killer. And I think that fear is very inhibiting. We look at fear and we're like, okay, now I'm not gonna do this thing because it's so scary. But I think you regret the chances that you regret the things that you don't do. You know what I mean? Like you regret the things that you were eyeing and exploring, but you never actually fulfilled. And I think one should like how do I phrase this? Have comfort in the fact that you did it, not the idea that you did it. You know what I mean? Like look at the experience as a new opportunity to grow and flourish. I like what you said. Woulda, coulda, shoulda. Yes, exactly. Just do it. You know what I mean? Because it's a new chance to explore yourself, a new culture, a new environment. And that's so beautiful. It's so beautiful to be able to be like, hey, I lived abroad and I met all these people, I learned all these languages, and I'm able to speak from experience and I'm able to grow internally because I was able to do this thing. And if you do it and you hate it, at least you did it. You know what I mean? So, yeah, just do it. See the experience through. And I hope that you have a great experience doing it because I know I have. So, yeah, yeah.
Okay. Well,
That's
thank
my
you so
that's my
much.
sign off. Of course. Thank you for having me. This is so fun.
Thank you for coming and sharing. And I am pretty confident that there is a parent who is going to see this that needed to hear it from the child's perspective. So we're
Yes.
very
Yes.
appreciative that you have shared that with us. Um, like I mentioned at the top of the hour, I will be back live tomorrow at PM Eastern. Um, So if you are watching this on the replay, um, thank you for that. Thank y'all for the folks who were here live, and I will see y'all tomorrow.
Beautiful.